the largest military base of NATO is in Romania. Probably you know about that.
Yes.
And of course, they want to launch the World War III from Romania. And with this situation, of course, they can involve all Europe and also United States. So these, they have interest. They have interest in war.
This is my video update on this Saturday afternoon, April the 12th. Coming to you from Limassol, Cyprus. Let's talk about some news. And we are going to start things off today with Witkoff. We are starting things off once again with Witkov. And he went to Russia, met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg. From what I understand, it was a long meeting. The topic of discussion, according to the Kremlin, was Ukraine, negotiating some sort of a Ukraine deal. And there were rumors that Witkoff also discussed Iran with Putin, but I cannot confirm those rumors. The only thing that we have coming from the Kremlin, coming from Peskov, is that they discussed Project Ukraine. That is what we know. There has been no readout or anything like that from the meeting between Putin and Witkov. Actually, let me tell you what Peskov said. The discussions between Russian President Vladimir Putin and White House Special Envoy Steve Witkov on Friday involved aspects of the settlement of the Ukraine conflict. The Kremlin has announced declining to provide further details. So before the meeting with Putin, the Witkov meeting with Putin, President Trump posted on Truth Social, Russia has to get moving. Too many people are dying, thousands a week, in a terrible and senseless war, a war that should have never happened and wouldn't have happened if I were president. Russia has to get moving. Russia has to get moving. President Trump. What are you doing, man? What are you doing? It's Russia's fault. Russia's to blame for the delay in getting some sort of a settlement in Ukraine, right? Russia has to get moving, according to President Trump. So, Reuters, they published an interesting article which absolutely confirms my hunch and much of my reporting over the past couple of weeks, and the Duran's reporting over the past couple of weeks on what is taking place in the Trump administration, the divisions in the Trump administration when it comes to Project Ukraine. And I have been saying that it is my belief that Witkov would absolutely go for Istanbul Plus. He wants to get to some sort of a deal on Project Ukraine and then get to some business with Russia. And that Kellogg and Waltz, those are the neocons in the Trump administration, the neocon faction in the Trump administration that is pushing for this unconditional ceasefire. And that is the division in the Trump administration. And Trump still has not figured out where he falls with all of this. And that is exactly what Reuters reported. yesterday. Exactly what Reuters reported yesterday. This is the division. Witkoff on one side, Kellogg on the other side. They didn't mention Waltz. They just mentioned Kellogg. The title of the Reuters article is Trump Envoys Embrace of Russian Demands Worries Republicans, U.S. Allies. The fastest way to broker a ceasefire in Ukraine, said Witkoff, was to support a strategy that would give Russia ownership of 4 eastern Ukrainian regions it attempted to annex illegally in 2022. 2 U.S. officials and 5 people familiar with the situation told Reuters. In the meeting with Trump, General Keith Kellogg, the president's Ukraine envoy, pushed back against Witkoff, saying Ukraine, though willing to negotiate some terms related to disputed land, would never agree to unilaterally cede total ownership of the territories to Russia, said 2 of the sources. The meeting ended without Trump making a decision to change the U.S. strategy. Witkoff traveled to Russia Friday to meet Putin. There you have it. Witkoff is ready to jump on June 2024. Root causes Istanbul plus terms, as outlined by Russian President Putin, end the conflict and move on to other business between the United States and Russia, normalize relations between the 2 countries, and do some good business, while Kellogg is saying no, 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 no. We must not allow Istanbul plus. We have to get a ceasefire. Ukraine will never agree to Istanbul plus. We have to go for a ceasefire. I do not agree with Witkoff. That is Kellogg's position. Keep in mind that Kellogg, he put together his idea of a settlement for Project Ukraine back in April of 2024. So let's get to Kellogg now that we know the division, now that we know the sides involved. It is super windy today. Let's see how the audio turns out. Come on, hoodie. Come on, Duran hoodie. What are you doing? What are you doing back there? So let's get to Kellogg. Let's talk some Kellogg's cornflakes. Kellogg, Keith Kellogg. Let's talk some Keith Kellogg. The UK Times, they interviewed Kellogg, and Kellogg presented his map. We have Kellogg's map for Ukraine, his ceasefire plan, his map, his solution to Project Ukraine. The Times, their interview is Trump envoy, Ukraine could be divided like post-war Berlin. Kellogg did not like the title of the Times interview, and he actually posted on X. The Times article misrepresents what I said. I was speaking of a post-ceasefire resiliency force in support of Ukraine's sovereignty. In discussions of partitioning, I was referencing areas or zones of responsibility of an allied force without U.S. troops. I was not referring to a partitioning of Ukraine. So he didn't like the title from the Times, divided like post-war Berlin, talking about partitioning Ukraine, and Kellogg is saying, no, I'm not talking about partitioning Ukraine. I'm talking about zones, man. It's a zone defense. It's not a man-to-man. It's a zone defense. He's talking about zones, not partitioning. Looking to preserve Ukraine's sovereignty. And in a way, he is looking to preserve Ukraine's sovereignty, but more than that, he's looking to create a Minsk III and to freeze the conflict and to wait Putin out. That is what his plan is all about. And it absolutely partitions Ukraine. He calls it zones. It looks like a partitioning to me, but we'll go with Kellogg and we'll zone it up. And putting the map on the screen, you can see the 3 zones. The front line freezes, according to Kellogg. Keep in mind, this is the plan that he's trying to push onto Trump. So we freeze the front line. Kellogg says it's going to be an 18-mile DMZ, a demilitarized zone. The east is what Russia holds on to, according to Kellogg. Then you have one zone, so that's zone number one, let's say, which is what Russia holds on to, with a demilitarized zone. Then you have zone number two, which is what, according to Kellogg, the Ukraine military will control. That's what they will patrol. That's what they will monitor, and that covers Sumy and Kharkov and a part of Kiev, basically the north center of the northeast center of Ukraine. And then you have, let's say, zone number three. Let's call it zone number three, which is a huge chunk of Ukraine, covering the west, Lviv, a part of Kiev, or all of Kiev. Can't really tell from this map. And of course, Odessa and the Black Sea. And that is going to be controlled, patrolled, monitored, whatever you want to call it, by European forces. That's right, everybody. Europe monitors or controls the West, Odessa, and the Black Sea, and it looks like Kiev. It looks like Kiev is monitored by both Ukraine and the West. It's kind of sitting there in the middle. So that's the map. That's the Kellogg map. What are your thoughts of the Kellogg map? Whew, Russia is not going to go for this one. No doubt about that. Russia is not going to like Kellogg's map. Anyway, that's the interview. That's the Kellogg plan. I think everything is very clear now, what is going on. Crystal clear. As we have been saying on the Duran, as we have been saying on this channel, as you guys have been saying in the comments below, we have Witkoff on one side, we have Kellogg on the other side, we have Istanbul Plus, we have the US working with Russia, normalizing relations, walking away from Project Ukraine, Trump not getting the blame for the defeat in Ukraine. That's on the one side. And then on the other side, we have Kellogg's map, unconditional ceasefire, Trump definitely getting the blame for a defeat in Project Ukraine. Trump better choose wisely when it comes between Witkoff and Kellogg. He better choose wisely. Anyway, the Times of UK, they were busy. They were busy with their Ukraine propaganda, and not to be outdone by the New York Times of the United States of America, the Times of the United Kingdom, they decided to publish their untold story of Ukraine. Remember the New York Times article that came out a couple of weeks ago, talking about the U.S. involvement in Ukraine, the command center in Germany, and how the United States, U.S. generals, Cavoli and other top U.S. generals, U.S. government officials, Biden government officials, Austin and all of these guys, they were basically running the war against Russia from this command center in Germany. Well, the British version, courtesy of the Times, is that the UK was also very much involved in this conflict against Russia. So what was the UK's role, according to the Times? Well, they played the central role in the 2023 super duper spring, summer, fall, autumn counter-offensive. That was very much the UK behind all of that. And the UK also played a major role in mediating between the United States and Kiev. Whenever there were tensions between the US and Kiev, it was the UK, it was Admiral, what's his name? Admiral Radikin, I believe Sir Tony Radikin, I believe is his full name. But he was one of the guys that would go to Kiev, meet with Zaluzhny, listen to Zaluzhny's concerns, and then he would talk to the US, and he was very much mediating between the U.S. and Ukraine whenever there was tensions or disagreements or anything like that. And the other role that the UK played, the military role, is that they would send people into Kiev. The Times said that sometimes the UK would send military officials, technicians, soldiers, whatever. They would send them to Kiev in plain clothes, because what they were doing when they would get to Ukraine is that they were helping set up the Storm Shadows and all of these things to attack Russia. That's what the Times said in their article. So now you know why you have all of these trains traveling to Kiev with all of these collective West leaders, Annalena and Trudeau and Lamy and all of these people that were traveling to Kiev almost every other day. And you're always asking the question, why are all these people going to Kiev? What is so urgent that they have to see Zelensky in person? Well, they were transporting all kinds of things back and forth from Kiev and the collective West. And according to the Times, the British were sending military personnel, specialists, so that they can help with the Storm Shadow and other weaponry, but mostly the Storm Shadow attacks against Russia. So quite an admission from the Times. The article gets into great detail with the 2023 super duper offensive, and it talks about how the Ukraine military, they named one of the axes for the offensive. They named it after Ben Wallace. They called it the Wallace Axis. That's how involved Ben Wallace was in all of this, and they were very, very much enamored. They had admiration for Ben Wallace, because Ben Wallace was one of the people that got a lot of weapons to Project Ukraine. They actually say that in this article that the Ukraine military would say Ben Wallace saved Kiev or something along those lines. That's what they would say about Ben Wallace, the man that saved Kiev. So the British, they worked very closely with Ukraine to plan the 2023 summer offensive. Yeah, his nickname was the man who saved Kiev. Sounds like a David Bowie song, right? The man who, what's the David Bowie song? The man who ruled the world, and Nirvana did a cover of it. I forgot the name of the song. Anyway, the man who saved Kiev, that was Ben Wallace's nickname. So they were planning, all of them were planning the counteroffensive, and it went terribly wrong because weapons started to get delayed. Ukraine started to delay the offensive as well. It was scheduled for, I believe they said for April, then for May, and the UK military officials were telling Zelensky, attack now, sever the land bridge between Crimea and the south. Russia's weak, but Ukraine kept on saying, we don't have the weapons. We need the weapons that you promised us, and everything started to get delayed. Eventually, in June, the offensive was launched, and it was a complete failure. And the article says that the blame was on Zelensky for delaying and on Syrskyi, because the U.S. got very upset with Ukraine. They wanted Syrskyi to Zaluzhny Syrskyi to concentrate all of Ukraine's power in the south, and Syrskyi convinced Zelensky to split up Ukraine's forces between the south and the center northeast, Bakhmut. And the U.S. got very upset with the Ukraine military. So the UK military, Radican, he had to smooth things over between the U.S. and Kiev. The U.S. was about to walk away from everything after the failure of the counteroffensive, but Radican brought the sides together, and they all became friends again. Anyway, that's the Times article. It's a long article. Basically, it says that the UK is in conflict with Russia. That's pretty much what it says. The UK is in conflict with Russia, and then at the end of the article, it talks about how the US is no longer in charge of the military contact group that usually meets in Germany. Sometimes it meets in Brussels, and this time around, it was the UK and Germany that took the lead. Pete Hegseth did not show up to this meeting. He did dial in by video, and now it's the UK that is pretty much taking over this war against Russia. So now you know why Stammer in the UK, they're deep into this. They're very, very deep into this. They've been in Ukraine, by the way, since 2015, according to the Times. UK military and Intel and all of these guys, they've been in Ukraine for a long, long time. So they're knee deep into this, and they're not getting out, man. The UK is not getting out, and they are absolutely in conflict. When you read this article, you understand that the UK is absolutely in conflict with Russia. That's how I read this thing. Anyway, we move on. We move on to another Reuters article, which says that Ukraine is negotiating with the Trump administration on the minerals deal. Oh my God, this minerals deal. The never-ending minerals deal. So they're negotiating the minerals deal again for the 1000th time. It's not going well for that windsurfer, huh? Not going well at all. It's a great day to windsurf, but he's having problems. He's having problems. He'll be all right. Anyway, the minerals deal. Ukraine is trying to negotiate it with the Trump administration. According to Reuters and their sources, it's going really, really bad. They're saying it is going horribly, terribly bad. And Reuters is reporting that one of the Easter eggs in this negotiation, in the minerals deal, that no one has talked about, but now Reuters is talking about it, is that the Trump administration wants full control of the Ukraine gas pipeline, the Gazprom. Oh, there he goes. All right. He's back up and moving. Yeah, the Trump administration wants full control of the Gazprom gas pipeline. We're not talking Nord Stream. We're talking the pipeline that Zelensky cut off at the end of 2024. The U.S. wants full control of that. That feeds into Europe. I believe it feeds into Slovakia, right? That's the gas pipeline that the U.S. wants full control of. Full control. And Ukraine is flipping out. They're saying no, no, no. But the Trump administration is saying yes, yes, yes. Basically, the Trump administration, if they get control of this pipeline and they work out something with Nord Stream, the United States would have full control of the pipelines that feed into the European Union. They would control, along with the LNG, they would pretty much control all of the energy supplies to the European Union, with the exception of Turk Stream. That would be it. That would be the only pipeline that would not be under the US's control if Ukraine were to agree to this minerals deal. US-Ukraine hold tense talks as mineral deal remains elusive. The source said that one of the Easter eggs found in the document was a US demand that the US government's International Development Finance Corporation take control of a natural gas pipeline from Russian energy giant Gazprom across Ukraine to Europe. The Ukrainian government has hired law firm Hogan Lovelis as an outside advisor on the minerals deal, the source said. So Ukraine is using US money to hire a US law firm to help negotiate this minerals deal. So Lavrov gave a press conference yesterday, and Lavrov said that there will never be a scenario where Zelensky is ruling over Russian nationals, Russian people, not nationals, Russian people. There will never be this scenario, he said, because Zelensky has openly stated his hatred towards Russia and towards Russian people. And he said that Russia will never allow him to rule over Russian people ever again. That's a strong indication as to where Russia sees the map going forward. And it is not going to be anywhere near Kellogg's map. It's not going to have any resemblance to Kellogg's map, because when Lavrov talks about Russian people, you know he's talking about Odessa. You know it, and Kharkiv, maybe even Kiev. Who knows? Zelensky mustn't govern Russians he despises, Lavrov. The foreign minister stressed that nobody would even hypothetically consider handing over those people to the Ukrainian leader. Doesn't get any more clear than that, than Lavrov's statement, as to where Russia sees this thing going. So Estonia, remember the video that I did about 3 days ago from Ayia Napa? I was walking through the bar, the clubbing district of Ayia Napa, and my clown world was Estonian media saying that that Estonia is going to start seizing Russian tankers, what they consider to be the shadow fleet, the Russian shadow ghost pirates of the Caribbean fleet. Well, Estonia did it. They did it. They seized a Russian tanker. My, oh my. Estonia, what are you thinking, man? What are you thinking? Yep, they seized a Russian tanker. I'm not sure where they seized it. Like if it was whose territorial waters we're talking about, or if it was in international waters or the territorial waters where this tanker was seized. I'm not even sure as to its flag. There are some reports saying that it didn't have a flag. There are other reports saying that it had a flag of Djibouti. I'm not certain there either. But Russian tanker seized by Estonia. That much we do know. Russia's response? So far, no statement at the time of recording this video. So we have some time. Not bad, Alex. You're getting through these news stories, huh? A lot of news today. I was worried. I thought this video would go on for 40 minutes. But so far, we're good on time. So we can do one more news story before we get to our clown world. And it has to do with the tariff war between China and the United States. And we are getting reports that China is looking at the EU to work together to deepen trade ties between China and the European Union remove whatever trade barriers exist. For example, with EVs, and China and the European Union together would go against Trump and his trade war that he is waging. That is what China is signaling. Xi wants EU-China tag team to resist Trump's trade onslaught. Chinese leader met Spanish PM Pedro Sanchez, who also promoted closer ties with Beijing. Sanchez was in Beijing, going against Scott Bessent's warnings. Remember, Bessent said that if Sanchez or European leaders went to China and decided to work with China, they would be cutting their own throats. That is what Bessent said. The other day, Sanchez, not afraid, he went to Beijing and he cut deals. He cut trade deals. Spain and China signed 4 cooperation agreements in tech, education, and film, and 2 new agricultural export deals for pork and cherries. They also signed deals on sanitary products, medicine, and cosmetic products. So Politico is reporting that in July, there was going to be a big summit meeting between the European Union and China, celebrating their 50th year of cooperation. And it was supposed to be in Europe, but because the last meeting they had was in China. But the European Union, also looking to do business with China, trade with China, they contacted Xi and they said, why don't we have it in Beijing for another year, which is something that has never happened. And Politico is saying that this is the EU's way of getting on Xi's good side by allowing him to host the summit for another year in China, which shows that the EU is very keen on getting some sort of a trade deal with China. If I was Russia, I would be watching this very carefully, because it looks like one of the outcomes of this trade war is that the European Union is now looking to get closer with China. And if you're Russia, you understand that the European Union wants to go to war with you. They're already in a coalition war using Ukraine, but the European Union, one of their stated goals, their main goal, their number one priority is to build up their military, to get stronger so that they can go to war with Russia. So if you're Russia, you got to be watching this very carefully, because here you have China coming along, and because China is now in a trade war with the United States, China and the EU are talking about getting closer together, and China could help the European Union build up its strength. And if you're Russia, you got to be looking at this saying, well, a strong EU is not good for us going forward, because a strong EU with the stated goal of going to war with Russia, well, that's obviously not in our interests. And China being our number one friend and our number one ally, perhaps we're going to need to have a talk with Xi Jinping. Anyway, interesting realignments, or at least they appear to be realignments. But if I was China, I would not trust the European Union. I would not trust the EU, because as Sanchez is making deals with China, you have Meloni, who is going to the United States in a couple of days, and she wants the EU to work with the Trump administration and to continue to align with the United States and not drift more towards China. So we do have an internal division within the European Union as to which direction they should go. So anyway, that is the news there, and let's do a clown world. And let's start off with Julian Ropske. the Bild reporter, who is very much pro-Zelensky, super duper pro-Ukraine and pro-Zelensky. And he posted on X a perfect example of Russia's horseshoe tactic that Vlad talked about. Unable to defeat the Ukrainian army in direct battles, Russia circumvents towns and villages to cut off logistics, forcing Ukrainian forces to withdraw in order to avoid being besieged. Right. So Ukraine, the Ukraine military, according to CNN, they're very concerned at the fact that Russia is looking to encircle them in many areas of the front line. Instead of going at them head on now, what Russia is doing is they're moving to encircle Ukrainian forces. For example, what's happening in Pokrovsk. And Julian Ropke is now saying, well, Russia doesn't want to take on Ukraine head on. They don't want to fight Ukraine head on. So what they're doing is they're using this horseshoe tactic. And many analysts on X, they mocked Julian Ropke because just last year, it was that the Russians were sending, they were using human wave tactics going head on against Ukraine, and Russia doesn't care about its military, and they throw soldiers into this grinder, this meat grinder, human wave tactics in order to defeat Ukraine, because that's the only way they can defeat Ukraine. And now the narrative has changed. Now the Russians, they don't want to go after Ukraine head on. No, they don't want to go after Ukraine head on. Now what they're doing is a horseshoe tactic. They're too afraid to go after Ukraine head on. So now they have to go around. Talk about cope, man, from Julian Ropke and from, I believe he writes for Bild. Cope, man. Complete cope. What else? Kamala Harris. Remember her? Remember her? She is, according to the New York Times, looking at becoming governor of California in 2026. Gavin Newsom will most likely be running for president in 2028. And according to the New York Times, Harris has her eye on becoming the governor of California. I can see it. I don't want to see it. I want the best for California, but unfortunately, I can definitely see a scenario where Kamala Harris does end up being the governor of California. Anyway, we have that story. And finally, a final clown world, and we'll wrap up this video. 3 clown worlds today. We go back to the Chinese soldiers in Ukraine, and we have reports. I cannot verify these reports. This could be fake news. I'm just saying that. This could be fake news, but it is clown world, and we like to play it a bit fast and loose in our clown world segment. We are getting reports that the Chinese soldiers, the 2 Chinese soldiers captured by Zelensky, like it so much in Kiev, in Ukraine, that they want to stay. That's how much they like it. They don't want to go back to Russia. They don't want to go back to China. They're loving it in Kiev. They're loving their life in Ukraine. And they would rather stay with Zelensky and hang out with Podolyak. Who doesn't want to hang out with Podolyak? Hey, Podolyak. The Chinese soldiers, they really like you, Podolyak. They've taken a liking to you. Captured Chinese citizen Chang Rembo says he does not want to return to Russia. In Ukraine, I am fed better than in Russia. We are treated better, and it is safer here. When asked what he would choose, to stay in Ukraine or return to China, Rembo said he would choose the latter. There you have it. Isn't it convenient? Zelensky doesn't have to. If China were to ask for these citizens, if they really are Chinese soldiers, say China really presses Ukraine and says, return these citizens back to us and we'll deal with them. Zelensky can now say, no, I'm not going to return them because they like it here. They like it here. They want to live here, man. Clown world, everybody. Anyway, the United States They've commented on these Chinese nationals in Ukraine, allegedly caught by the Green Goblin. And the United States, according to Reuters, they are saying that these Chinese nationals are mercenaries, is according to US officials. So they are categorizing these two nationals as mercenaries. Anyway, that is the video, everybody. theduran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and X. Go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch, like what I'm wearing in this video update. And the video did end up being kind of a long video after all, but I did do 3 clown worlds. So I will see everybody tomorrow. Take care. That is one big cat. Jeez. Where are you? Hey, buddy. All right, everybody. I'm going to hang out with this big cat here, and I will see everybody tomorrow. Take care.